I remember the day it all started, not with a bang, but with a barely perceptible shift in the air, like the quiet change in pressure before a storm. My son, Daniel, had just married Clara, a woman I'd only known for a few months but who carried herself with an unsettling confidence. They needed a place to live, and with my large house, far too big for just me after my husband passed, I offered them the spare wing. It felt like the natural, loving thing to do. What I didn't tell them, what I kept close to my chest like a secret prayer, was that the house, this grand old home that held decades of my memories, was still entirely in my name. And thank goodness I didn't, because that unspoken truth became my shield, my fortress, when Clara and her mother, Beatrice, tried to take everything from me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just a few weeks after the wedding. I was in the garden, pruning my roses, a small ritual that brought me immense peace. The air was warm, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming petals. The gentle hum of bees was the only sound, a soothing counterpoint to the quiet snip of my shears. The sun warmed my back, a comforting weight. When I stepped inside, the cool, dim interior of the house was a welcome contrast. But the sudden shift in atmosphere was palpable. I heard their voices, Clara's bright and commanding, Beatrice's low and conspiratorial, drifting from the living room. They stood by the fireplace, the one my husband and I had spent months restoring, meticulously cleaning each tile, polishing the brass until it gleamed. They pointed and gestured with an almost surgical precision, as if dissecting a blueprint. "This wall has to go, Clara," Beatrice declared, her voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "It opens up the space, makes it feel modern, and the kitchen, we'll need to gut it entirely. It's so dated." I paused, pruning shears still in hand, the scent of roses suddenly bitter in my nose, replaced by the faint metallic tang of unease. Dated? This kitchen, with its sturdy oak cabinets and worn butcher block island, where I'd cooked countless meals, hosted holidays, celebrated life's milestones? It was the heart of my home, imbued with the laughter and love of a lifetime. Clara turned, seeing me standing there, framed by the archway to the living room. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a practiced, polite curve of the lips, the kind you give to a distant acquaintance, not your husband's mother. It felt thin, almost translucent, masking something colder beneath. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, and the way she used my first name, so casually, so dismissively, felt like a tiny prick, a pinprick that promised a deeper wound. She never called me Mom, or Mrs. Davies, just Eleanor. It was a subtle but effective way of establishing distance, of marking territory. Mom and I were just discussing some improvements. This house is simply far too large for one person, and with Daniel and I living here now, and our plans for a family, it just makes sense for you to find something smaller. A cozy apartment, perhaps, more suitable for your age. Beatrice nodded, a smug, knowing look on her face, her eyes glinting with an almost predatory satisfaction. "Exactly, Eleanor. All these stairs, it's not safe. At your age, you need something manageable. And we need the space, of course. Daniel and Clara will be having children soon. You've done your part, dear. Time to rest." Rest? It sounded less like an invitation to relax and more like a polite eviction notice, a suggestion that I should simply vanish, make myself scarce, so they could claim what they already believed was theirs. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like a shroud. I stood there, the weight of the pruning shears suddenly heavy in my hand, a dull ache spreading from my knuckles to my wrist. A flush crept up my neck, a hot wave of indignation threatening to overwhelm me, but I didn't say a word. My throat felt tight, constricted by a sudden surge of emotion. I simply walked past them, my steps measured and deliberate, placed the shears on the kitchen counter with a soft clink, and went to my room. I closed the door softly, the click of the latch a small, defiant punctuation mark. I sat on the edge of my bed, the familiar floral pattern of the quilt a small comfort, and took a deep, shaky breath. 1, 2, 3 times. My friend, Martha, from my weekly art class, always told me, "When you feel the fire, Eleanor, breathe. Breathe and think before you act." And I breathed. Not because I was scared, not because I felt small. I breathed because I knew, in that exact moment, that a battle had begun, and I needed to be strategic. They didn't know it, but I had my own secret weapon. When Daniel told me he was getting married, I was genuinely happy. My son was 35, and while he'd had relationships, nothing serious had ever stuck. When he met Clara at his law firm, I saw a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He'd talk about her late into the night, his face alight with an almost boyish enthusiasm. He'd describe her sharp wit, her ambition, her infectious laugh. I wanted him to be happy, to have a partner, a family of his own. I'd lived my life. I'd been a wife, a mother, a career woman. After my husband passed, I'd worked for 25 years as a legal secretary, retiring 5 years ago. Now at 68, I had my routine, my friends, my book club, my weekly art class, where I was finally learning to paint landscapes, finding a new, vibrant outlet for my creativity. I wasn't some frail old woman lost in time, waiting for the end. I had a life, full and rich, but I also had a mother's heart that longed to see her son settled and content. So 2 months before the wedding, when Daniel mentioned that their small apartment was too expensive and they needed a place, I didn't hesitate. "Stay here," I told him, my voice warm with genuine affection. "There's plenty of room. As long as I'm alive, this house is your home too." I meant it then, with all my heart, but I omitted one crucial detail. I didn't tell him that the house was still entirely in my name. The deed, the papers, everything was legally mine. At one point, I had considered transferring the property to him, a gift for his future, a tangible expression of my love and support. But something, a quiet intuition I couldn't explain, a tiny whisper of caution in the back of my mind, had said, "Wait, not yet," and I waited. It turned out to be the smartest decision I ever made. That whisper, barely audible at the time, now felt like a prophetic roar. From the day of the wedding, things began to shift, subtly at first, like the slow creep of ivy up a wall. Clara arrived with 3 enormous suitcases, depositing them in Daniel's room as if it were the most natural thing in the world, her movements confident and possessive. Fine, I thought. They're married, it's normal. But then came the boxes. Boxes and boxes of her things. Clothes, shoes, decorative items, framed photos. She began to arrange them throughout the house. The living room, the dining room, the hallways. Each new item felt like a small invasion, a quiet colonization of my familiar spaces. One morning, I came downstairs to find the cherished portrait of my late husband, which had hung in the entryway for 20 years, his kind eyes a constant, comforting presence, replaced by a large, ornate mirror. The empty space where his face had been felt like a gaping wound. I felt a pang in my chest, a tightening, a sudden coldness, but I said nothing. I simply took the portrait to my room and placed it on my dresser, where I could see his gentle smile every morning. Daniel didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't comment. His silence was a new, unsettling presence in the house. 2 weeks later, Clara started moving furniture. The antique writing desk where I paid my bills, a piece passed down from my grandmother, was relocated to the garage, relegated to storage. My favorite armchair, a plush velvet sanctuary where I read in the afternoons, was pushed into a corner, almost hidden behind a monstrous, modern sculpture she'd brought in, all sharp angles and cold metal. Every time I returned from my art class or a walk with Martha, the house felt subtly different, less and less like my own. The air itself seemed to change, growing colder, less welcoming. Still, I held my tongue. I told myself, she lives here now, she has a right to feel comfortable. I didn't want to be the stereotypical meddling mother-in-law, the one who nitpicked every decision. I wanted my son to be happy. How naive I was. Clara wasn't trying to feel comfortable, she was trying to erase me. She was systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, and I didn't fully grasp it until it became undeniable. The subtle shifts were becoming overt declarations. The first major red flag was when she invited her mother, Beatrice, to stay for a few days. Beatrice arrived on a Friday evening with 2 large suitcases and a smile that set my teeth on edge. It was the smile of a predator, a winner before the game had even begun, a thin veneer of politeness barely concealing a sharp, calculating intelligence. "Oh, Eleanor, what a charming house you have," she purred, surveying my home as if appraising its market value, her eyes darting from the antique chandelier to the Persian rug. "Clara told me there's so much space, and since I'm all alone after my divorce, Well, I thought I'd come for a few days to keep you girls company. You girls. Not us girls. You girls. As if I were already an outsider, a guest in my own home, a mere accessory to their plans. The phrase grated on my ears, a tiny, insidious seed of doubt planted in my mind. Those few days, stretched into a week, then 2, then a month. Beatrice made herself entirely at home, her presence expanding to fill every available space. She'd sleep late, emerging from her room well after I'd had my coffee and finished my morning chores. She'd leave her belongings scattered across the living room, a half-read magazine on the coffee table, a pair of reading glasses on the mantelpiece, a used teacup on the antique side table. She'd use my bathroom without asking, even my expensive lotions and the good towels I saved for special guests, leaving a faint, unfamiliar scent in the air. Clara said nothing. On the contrary, the two of them began making plans together, plans about my house, their voices often hushed, punctuated by knowing glances in my direction. It was during Beatrice's second week that I started to feel a deep unease, a cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the discomfort of an extra person in my space, it was the way they looked at me, the way their conversations would abruptly cease when I entered a room, their eyes exchanging silent, conspiratorial messages. One Wednesday morning, I left early for my art class. Martha picked me up at 9, as always, her cheerful honk a familiar sound. The morning light was crisp and clear, promising a productive day of painting, but halfway through the class, as I was trying to capture the subtle nuances of a distant mountain range, I realized I'd left my phone at home. I didn't think much of it. I'd be back in a couple of hours. That day, however, the instructor ended class early, due to a sudden headache, dismissing us with an apologetic wave. When I walked back into my house, the front door slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the polished wood floor, I heard Clara and Beatrice talking loudly in the kitchen. They didn't expect me back so soon. Their voices, usually modulated when I was present, were now sharp and uninhibited. "She's so set in her ways, Mom," Clara was saying, her voice laced with an impatience I'd never heard directed at me, a thinly veiled contempt. "She refuses to change anything. This place needs a complete overhaul. It's a museum." "A museum of what, dear?" Beatrice chuckled. A dry, brittle sound. "Dust and old memories? No. This house has potential, good bones, but Eleanor needs to understand that it's not just hers anymore. It's for you and Daniel, for your future family." The words were like tiny shards of glass, piercing through the thin veil of my composure. "I know," Clara sighed dramatically, a sound of theatrical exasperation. "But she's so resistant. I tried to suggest a new paint color for the living room, a soft gray, and she just gave me that look." "That look won't pay the bills, will it?" Beatrice said, her voice dropping conspiratorially, a low murmur that still carried clearly through the quiet house. "We need to make her see reason. This house is a gold mine, Clara. Think of the equity once we update it. And with Eleanor here, well, it complicates things. She's a lovely woman, of course, but she's an obstacle." My blood ran cold. An obstacle. That's what I was to them. Not a mother, not a homeowner, not even a person with feelings, but an impediment, a hurdle to be overcome. I stood there, hidden by the archway, the cool air of the hallway doing little to calm the sudden heat that flared within me, listening to them dissect my life, my home, my very presence. They were talking about me as if I were an inanimate object, a piece of furniture to be moved or discarded, a problem to be solved. They were plotting. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I quietly backed away, my movements slow and deliberate, each step a conscious effort to remain silent. I retrieved my phone from the side table in the entryway, my fingers trembling slightly, and slipped out the front door, closing it softly behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the sudden silence. I walked to the park, the familiar path blurring before my eyes, my mind reeling, a chaotic storm of anger, hurt, and a growing sense of betrayal. I found a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, its leaves rustling gently in the breeze, and called Martha. "They're talking about me, Martha," I whispered, my voice trembling, barely audible. "They want me out. They want my house." Martha, ever the pragmatist, listened patiently, her calm voice a lifeline in my turbulent thoughts. "Eleanor, what did you tell Daniel about the house?" "That it was his home too, as long as I lived," I said, remembering my exact words, the innocent intention behind them now twisted into something sinister. But I never transferred the deed. It's still in my name. A pause. Then Martha's voice, firm and clear, cutting through the fog of my distress. Then they can't do a thing, can they? Not legally. A small spark ignited within me, a tiny flicker of hope in the darkness. She was right. They couldn't. Not without my consent. That conversation, overheard by chance, was my wake-up call. The war had indeed begun, and I had my weapon. The deed. The legal document that affirmed my ownership, my control. It was a simple piece of paper, but it held immense power. The next day, I started to observe them more closely, my senses heightened. Every word, every gesture, scrutinized. Every suggestion Clara made, every casual comment about renovation, now felt like a calculated move, a chess piece being advanced on the board. She started talking about taking out a loan for a major kitchen remodel, a sum I knew was substantial, far beyond what Daniel could comfortably afford on his own. Daniel and I are thinking of applying for a home equity loan, she announced one evening at dinner, her voice bright, her eyes looking directly at me, a challenge in their depths. It's a great way to invest in the property, don't you think, Eleanor? She took a sip of water, her gaze unwavering, clearly expecting me to agree, to fall into line. I met her gaze, a calm mask on my face, my heart beating a steady, resolute rhythm. A home equity loan, Clara? On whose home? Precisely. My voice was even, betraying none of the turmoil within. She blinked, momentarily thrown off, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Well, on this home, of course. It'll be in Daniel's name. She recovered quickly, her practiced smile returning. A $50,000 loan to remodel a house that isn't his? I asked, my voice still even, but with an underlying steel that I hoped she would perceive. Clara fell silent, her smile faltering, then disappearing entirely. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes that resembled fear, a dawning realization that her carefully constructed plan might be unraveling. Eleanor, we just want to improve the house. Her voice was softer now, a hint of desperation creeping in. No, I said slowly, deliberately, each word a hammer blow. You want to erase me. You want me to leave. You want to take what I built. But you're in for a surprise. I rose from the table, the scrape of my chair against the floor a loud punctuation mark, and went to my room before she could formulate a response, leaving her stunned and speechless. Later that night, Daniel came to my door, his knock tentative, almost apologetic. Mom, Clara told me you were upset about the loan. His voice was laced with a familiar discomfort, a desire to smooth things over, to avoid conflict. I wasn't upset, Daniel. I corrected him, my voice soft but firm, refusing to be cast as the emotional, unreasonable woman. I was concerned. You're planning to spend $50,000 on a house that is still legally mine, without even asking me. That's not just upsetting, it's disrespectful and financially irresponsible. But Mom, you said the house would be mine someday. He looked genuinely confused, caught between two conflicting narratives. Someday, Daniel, I reiterated, my voice soft but firm, emphasizing the word. Someday, not today, not next week, and until that day comes, I am still the owner. I still decide what does and doesn't get done in this house. This is my property, my investment, my home. Clara, who had followed Daniel, her face tight with barely suppressed anger, interjected, her voice sharp, cutting through the air. It's just that we don't know what you want anymore, Eleanor. Sometimes it seems like you want us to leave. There it was, the trap, waiting for me to confirm their victim narrative, to validate their perceived grievances. But I was learning to play this game, and I wouldn't fall for it. I don't want you to leave, I said calmly, looking directly at her, my gaze unwavering. I just want respect. Respect in my own home. Respect for my decisions, for my property, for my very presence. After that dinner, the pretense evaporated entirely, like mist in the morning sun. Clara and Beatrice stopped their fake smiles and forced pleasantries. Now, they simply ignored me, their faces set in hard, unyielding lines. They'd walk past me as if I were invisible, their voices loud and clear, talking about their plans, the remodel, how they would arrange the rooms when the children arrived, their words a deliberate provocation. Daniel remained in the middle, a silent, uncomfortable observer, never taking a side, his silence a growing chasm between us. He seemed to shrink, to become smaller, less present, a ghost in his own home. One Saturday morning, during my walk with my neighborhood group, the crisp autumn air a welcome balm on my skin, Martha asked me how things were. Bad, I told her, my voice heavy, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Worse every day. They don't even pretend anymore. They talk as if I don't exist, as if I'm already gone. And Daniel, my son, says nothing. He pretends not to see, not to hear. He's chosen his side, even if he won't admit it. Martha shook her head, her expression one of deep concern. Eleanor, how long are you going to put up with this? You're losing yourself in your own home. Not much longer, I admitted, a new resolve hardening my voice. I'm just waiting for the right moment, the moment when they push too far. The right moment for what? She pressed, her eyes searching mine. To show them who owns that house, to remind them, unequivocally. Martha smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the fighter she knew I was. There's my friend, the Eleanor I know. Her words were a much-needed affirmation. That same afternoon, when I returned home, the familiar scent of my house now tinged with an unfamiliar tension, I saw something that solidified my resolve, turning my quiet determination into a blazing fire. A large truck, emblazoned with the logo of a construction company, was parked in front of my house, its engine idling, a symbol of impending invasion. In the entryway, Clara was talking animatedly to two men carrying rolled-up blueprints, their faces serious and professional. I approached them slowly, my heart beginning to pound a heavy rhythm against my ribs, a mixture of fear and righteous anger churning within me. What's going on here? My voice, though low, cut through their conversation like a knife. Clara turned, a mix of defiance and nervousness on her face, her eyes widening slightly at my unexpected presence. It's the contractors, Eleanor. They came to give an estimate for the remodel. She tried to sound casual, but her voice was strained. The estimate? I repeated, my voice dangerously low, each syllable carefully enunciated. Without consulting me? Without my permission? Well, Daniel already gave the okay, Clara began, her voice rising slightly, a defensive edge creeping in. And Daniel is not the owner of this house, I interrupted, looking directly at the two men, my gaze firm and unwavering. Gentlemen, I'm sorry you came all this way, but there will be no remodel. This is my house, and I did not authorize any work. The words hung in the air, cold and clear. One of the men looked at Clara, confused, then back at me, his brow furrowed. Ma'am, you called us and said it was urgent we come out to measure. I called them, Clara snapped, her composure cracking, her voice shrill with frustration. Because I live here, and I have a right to improve my home. Your home, I repeated, and I felt the rage rise in my throat like fire, a searing heat that threatened to consume me. Your home, Clara? Well, Daniel's home. It's the same thing. I paused, letting the implication sink in. But it's not right. Your home, not legally. I turned back to the contractors, my voice regaining its calm, authoritative tone. Gentlemen, this house is in my name, Eleanor Davies. You can check the public record if you like. And I repeat, there is no work authorized here. So I'm asking you to please leave. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces reflecting a clear understanding of the situation. Then one of them nodded, his expression apologetic. Understood, ma'am. We're sorry for the misunderstanding. We'll be on our way. They gathered their tools, rolled up their blueprints, and quickly exited, leaving Clara and me standing alone in the entryway, the silence thick with unspoken animosity. I stood there in front of Clara, my heart thudding against my ribs, a drumbeat of defiance. How dare you? I said, my voice shaking with indignation, but not with fear. How dare you call contractors to my house without my permission, without even a word to me? It's because you don't want to improve anything, Clara shot back, her voice now devoid of any sweetness, pure venom, her face contorted with fury. This house is old, it's ugly, it's outdated, and you won't do anything to fix it. Her words were a direct assault on my taste, my life, my very being. Because it's my house, I retorted, meeting her furious gaze head on, my own eyes blazing with a newfound strength. And I like it the way it is. It holds my memories, my life. It doesn't need fixing just because it doesn't fit your modern aesthetic. Well, we don't. We're going to live here, so we have a right to an opinion, she shrieked, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. An opinion, yes. A decision, no. Because this house is mine. Clara, mine. Not yours. Not Daniel's. Mine. I emphasized the word, letting it resonate in the quiet space, a declaration of ownership and sovereignty. But Daniel said you were going to leave it to him someday, she cried, her voice cracking with frustration. When I decide to, but that day isn't today, and the way things are going, that day might never come. The words were out, sharp and final, a line drawn in the sand. Clara looked at me as if I had slapped her face paling, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She opened her mouth to say something, but just then, Beatrice arrived, her eyes widening at the scene, sensing the shift in power dynamics. What happened? Why did the truck leave? Because Eleanor kicked them out, Clara practically shrieked, her voice trembling with fury, tears welling in her eyes. Because she doesn't want us to fix anything. Because she wants us to live in this horrible house forever. Oh, Eleanor, Beatrice said, approaching with that superior, condescending air that always infuriated me. Her lips pursed in a judgmental frown. We get it. You don't want to cooperate. You don't want to help. You just want to keep everything as it is, because you're selfish. Her words were designed to wound, to diminish. Selfish? I repeated, the word a bitter taste in my mouth, a fresh wave of anger washing over me. I'm selfish because I don't want you to do whatever you please in my own home, because I want to protect what is mine. This house should belong to your son, Beatrice snapped, her voice now hard, stripped of any pretense of kindness, revealing the true malice beneath. A son you emotionally abandoned for years while you worked all day. A son who needed a mother, but you preferred your career. I froze, the accusation hitting me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. How dare she? How dare this woman, who knew nothing about me, nothing about my life, nothing about the sacrifices I had made, judge me like that? The pain of her words was sharp, cutting through the anger to a deeper, more vulnerable place. I worked, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rage, the memories of those difficult years flooding back. Because Daniel's father died, and someone had to put food on the table. Someone had to pay the mortgage, keep a roof over our heads. I worked for 25 years to give him an education, clothes, a roof over his head. I worked to buy this very house. And now you come here, having done nothing, having contributed nothing, having no understanding of my struggles, and tell me I'm a bad mother? I didn't say you were a bad mother, Beatrice retorted, though her eyes said otherwise, a cold, calculating glint in their depths. I said you abandoned him emotionally. You were never there. You know nothing about what I was or wasn't for my son, I said, my voice gaining strength, the tremor replaced by a steely resolve. And you know nothing about this house. So let me make this perfectly clear. You, Beatrice, are a guest here. And you, Clara, are a guest here. And if you don't like the way I run my house, if you don't like my outdated taste, then you are both free to leave. In fact, I insist. The words were out, clear and unequivocal, a point of no return. Clara gasped, a sharp, choked sound. Daniel, who had been standing silently by the door, a silent, miserable witness to the escalating confrontation, finally spoke, his voice weak and pleading. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying, I turned to my son, my heart aching but my resolve unwavering, my gaze meeting his directly, that this is my house, and I will not tolerate being disrespected in it. I will not tolerate being told I'm an obstacle. I will not tolerate my home being dismantled without my consent. You chose to marry Clara, Daniel. You chose to bring her and her mother into my home. Now, you need to choose where your loyalty lies. With the woman who raised you, who gave you this home, or with the women who seek to take it from me. He looked from me to Clara, his face a mask of confusion and distress, his eyes darting back and forth, unable to meet either of our gazes for long. He seemed to be weighing the impossible choice, the weight of it crushing him. Mom, don't do this. His voice was barely a whisper, a desperate plea. I'm not doing this, Daniel, I said, my voice softening slightly, a pang of maternal pain piercing through my resolve, but my eyes remained firm. They are. They've been doing this since the day they arrived. I'm simply defending what's mine. What I built. What I earned. The argument escalated, a whirlwind of accusations and tears, the air thick with raw emotion. Clara, infuriated, declared she wouldn't stay another minute in a house where she wasn't wanted, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. Beatrice, ever the instigator, chimed in, telling Daniel he deserved better, that I was being unreasonable, that I was driving them away. Daniel, caught in the middle, seemed to shrink before my eyes, his shoulders slumping, his face pale. He tried to mediate, to calm them, to find some middle ground, but it was too late. The dam had broken, and the torrent of resentment and anger was unstoppable. Fine, Clara finally spat, her eyes blazing with a cold fury, tears streaming down her face. If that's how you feel, Eleanor, we'll leave, but don't expect to see us again. Don't expect to see your son again. The threat hung in the air, a cruel, final blow. Clara, Daniel pleaded, his voice choked with despair. No, Daniel, she said, her voice cold and unyielding, her decision made. She's made her choice. Now you make yours. It's either her or me. It was the hardest moment of my life. To watch my son, torn between his new wife and his mother, stand there, paralyzed, unable to choose, unable to speak. My heart ached for him, for the pain he was clearly in, but I knew what I had to do. I had to stand firm. The choice has been made, Clara, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, the tears blurring my vision. And the door is right there. I will not be held hostage in my own home. Within hours, Clara and Beatrice were packing their suitcases, their movements angry and resentful, the sounds of zippers and rustling fabric echoing through the house. Daniel, looking utterly defeated, his face etched with sorrow, helped them, his eyes avoiding mine, unable to meet my gaze. There was no grand farewell, no last words, just the slamming of car doors and the screech of tires as they drove away, leaving a gaping void in their wake. This time, for good. When I closed the front door behind them, the heavy oak door clicking shut with a definitive thud, a profound silence descended upon the house. It was a silence I hadn't felt in months, perhaps years. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the absence of tension, of manipulation, of the constant, insidious pressure. Peace. True, unadulterated peace. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. I walked through the quiet rooms, touching familiar objects, feeling the comforting solidity of my home around me. Martha came over that evening, bringing a casserole and a bottle of wine, her presence a warm, comforting balm. "How do you feel?" she asked, pouring us each a glass, her eyes full of understanding. "Free," I said, a small, weary smile touching my lips, a deep sigh escaping me. "I feel free. And exhausted." "And Daniel?" she asked gently, knowing the unspoken pain that lingered. "He's looking for an apartment," I told her, my voice tinged with a lingering sadness. I think he's getting a divorce, though he hasn't told me directly. He just said things weren't working out." "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel like my son is learning," I said, looking out at the twilight settling over my garden, the soft glow of the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Late, but he's learning. He's learning about loyalty, about respect, about what truly matters. Martha squeezed my hand, a silent understanding passing between us, a shared acknowledgement of the difficult truths of life. The weeks turned into months. I painted the house, not the sterile, impersonal colors Clara had envisioned, but the warm, inviting shades I had always loved. A soft cream for the living room, a gentle sage green for my bedroom, colors that reflected my own sense of peace and comfort. I rehung my pictures, the portrait of my husband taking its rightful place in the entryway, his kind eyes once again greeting me. I arranged my plants in every sunny corner, their vibrant green leaves a testament to life and growth. Slowly, lovingly, the house began to feel like mine again, imbued with my spirit, my memories, my peace. Daniel came to visit one Saturday morning, a few months after the separation. He looked different, thinner perhaps, The tension that had once been etched on his face now softened, but also calmer, less tense. The haunted look in his eyes had receded. "Hi, Mom." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Hi, son. Come on in." I opened the door wide, a genuine smile on my face, a sense of cautious hope in my heart. We went to the kitchen. I poured him some coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, and we sat at the old wooden table, the same table where so many family meals had been shared. "I got divorced," he said, just like that, the words hanging in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. "How do you feel?" I asked gently, my voice soft, offering him a space to share, to heal. Relieved, sad, confused, all at once. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of weariness. It was a lot. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you ever going to really forgive me for not standing up for you, for letting things get so out of hand?" His eyes met mine, vulnerable and searching. I looked him in the eye, my gaze steady. "I already have, Daniel. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means it doesn't hurt as much anymore. It means I can look at you without feeling rage. But it also means I learned how to protect myself. And that's not going to change. I have boundaries now, and they are firm." "I understand," he said, and I saw in his eyes that he truly did. A new maturity, a new understanding. "Did you find an apartment?" "Yeah, it's small, but it's good. It's close by. I was thinking maybe I could come visit more often. Just you and me. No drama." "I'd like that," I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes, a warmth spreading through my chest. The chasm between us was beginning to close. And that's how we started over. Not like before, never quite like before. The innocence of our previous relationship was gone, replaced by a new awareness, a new understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. But we started with respect, with boundaries, with truth. It was a stronger foundation, built on honesty and hard-won lessons. Today, 6 months after it all, I wake up early. The first rays of sunlight filter through the lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the bedroom floor. I make my coffee, the gentle gurgle of the machine a comforting sound in the quiet morning. I sit in my living room, in my favorite armchair, the one Clara had tried to banish, surrounded by the quiet hum of my home, the familiar scent of old books and fresh flowers, and I smile. Martha and I still go to our art class on Wednesdays, our canvases slowly filling with vibrant landscapes. My walking group still expects me on Saturdays, our conversations light and easy, and on Sundays, Daniel comes for lunch. He brings dessert, usually a pie from the local bakery. I cook his favorite dish, a hearty pot roast or a comforting chicken and dumplings, and we talk about his work, about his new life, about his plans. We don't talk about Clara. We don't talk about what happened. We don't need to anymore. The past is the past, and we are both moving forward. Last week, my sister from out of state came to visit. We took pictures in the living room, the house full of light and flowers, her laughter echoing through the rooms. I uploaded the photos to social media, and I felt a deep sense of pride. Proud of my house, restored to its former glory, a sanctuary of peace. Proud of my life, rebuilt with strength and resilience. Proud that I stood up for myself, for my home, for my dignity. This morning, while I was drinking coffee on the patio, the cool morning air a gentle kiss on my skin, I thought about the long road I'd traveled, about how I was on the verge of losing everything. My house, my dignity, my peace. But I didn't lose it because I learned something fundamental, that sometimes defending what is yours means being willing to end up alone. It means being brave when everyone expects you to be weak. It means saying no when your whole life you've said yes, when you've always put others first. And even though it hurt, even though there were nights of tears and days of loneliness, even though I had to confront my own son, it was worth it. Because now, when I wake up every morning in my house, in my bed, in my space, I feel something I haven't felt in years. I feel like I am the owner of my life. Not just my house, but my entire existence. And that, after 68 years, after raising a son alone, after working for decades, after enduring everything I endured, that is the most valuable thing I have. It is my hard-won freedom. Yesterday, Martha asked me if I missed having someone living with me. Sometimes, I told her honestly, looking out at the vibrant colors of my garden. But I would rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and destroyed. She nodded, her understanding deep and unspoken. Because she understands too. Because we are both women who learned that being alone is not the same as being empty. That being alone can sometimes be the most profound way of being whole, of truly knowing and cherishing oneself. This afternoon, I'm going to the salon. I'm going to get my haircut a little shorter than before, more modern, a fresh start. And then Martha and I are going to walk in the new park that opened nearby, exploring its winding paths and blooming flowers. And tonight, when I get back to my house, I'm going to lock the door. I'm going to make my chamomile tea, its soothing aroma filling the kitchen. I'm going to sit in my living room, in the quiet embrace of my home. And I'm going to take a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, a sense of profound gratitude washing over me. And I'm going to smile, because finally, after so many years of taking care of everyone, sacrificing for everyone, living for everyone, I'm finally the one who decides. I decide who I let into my house. I decide who I let into my life. I decide how I want to live my years. And that freedom, that peace, that power over my own existence, it's everything. It is the legacy I will leave myself. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.